All right, I am back, and we're going to talk about how balance works within the ear now. So we just review real quick. We talked about how hair cells within the cochlea are going to pick up sound and how that all works and transmission of vibrations through the ear. We're now going to talk about how you do balance within the ear. So balance is done in two portions of the ear. There's really two types of balance, and I think I put these up here. Right here. There's static equilibrium and dynamic equilibrium. Static means standing still. So static equilibrium means I am not in motion. So right now, I'm static. Well, I could close my eyes and I know that my head is oriented, in a stand-up position because my ear is telling me so. If I lay down on my back, I can tell I'm on my back because my ear is telling me so. We take this for granted. A lot of times we don't realize that, my ear is orienting me when I lay down on my back or on my stomach or on my side. And even if I couldn't feel the pressure, say I were, somehow I didn't feel the pressure underneath me, maybe I'm in water or something, I should be able to tell which way's up and which way's down based on gravity and its effect on my inner ear. Dynamic equilibrium is equilibrium of motion. This is when I'm running or when I'm hopping or jumping jacks or somersaults or cartwheels. This allows me to do those motions. If my dynamic equilibrium within my inner ear, did not work, I would be tipsy all the time. I would fall off. I wouldn't have any balance. I wouldn't be able to walk across the room. I would be stumbling and just have terrible balance if it weren't for these systems working as they should. Okay, static equilibrium. Static equilibrium, which I said already, is equilibrium when you're standing still, occurs in the vestibule of the ear. And this is how it works. I love this little diagram. What you've got is you have these within the vestibule. You have hair cells, just like the cochlea has these hair cells that are on the basilar membrane. You have hair cells that are within the vestibule of the ear, and what these hair cells do is they will detect gravity. So right here, I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can see these little structures right here. These are called otoliths. Can't remember if I have them in the PowerPoint later on, but you will need to know them. Otoliths are mineral deposits. And these mineral deposits are located within a gel-like, I don't really want to call it a fluid, but I guess it kind of is, within the vestibule of the ear. And it works like this. When I turn my head to the side, let me draw a picture of here. So here's my hair cells. Really messed up there. So here's my hair cells, and here is this gel-like fluid that is around the hair cells, and then right here are these what we call otoliths. And if you notice, the gel kind of slumps down. The otoliths act as weights. Okay, they have some weight to them, and they cause this gel to kind of sag. And as it does, it tweaks the hair cells, okay? And it tells my brain, hey, your head is tilted in this way because those hair cells are tweaked in that direction. If I were, so say for example, I turn my head to the side like this. I know I'm on the side because those hair cells are being dragged in that direction, and that sends a message to my brain, hey, your head is tilted to the side. If I tilt the other way, they sag the other direction. Those otoliths drag down that gel substance the other direction, tweaking the cells the other way, and it says, hey, your head's leaning to the left, or your head's leaning to the right, okay? And that's what it's showing right here. That all takes place in the vestibule. Okay? So important to know, some important things to know. Again, it is my hair cells that pick up this sense. Also, important to know, otoliths are these mineral deposits that make this gel-like fluid sag. And that sagging causes the hair cells to tweak and tells my brain, it orients my head within space. Is it to the side? Is it to the other side? Is it to the forward? Is it back? Or is it straight up? Let's talk about dynamic equilibrium for a second. Dynam, the root dynam means changing. So this is equilibrium, this changing. This is your equilibrium of motion. Again, we have this semi-solid gel that the hair cells are embedded in. Now this is a little bit different. At the base of each semicircular canal, so there's these semicircular canals. At the base of these semicircular canals, you have this gel that is able to be tweaked, and that tells me, that's how I tell I'm in motion. I'll explain that a little bit more here in a second. So, dynamic equilibrium occurs in the semicircular canals. Semicircular canals are these. They call them semicircular because they're like half circles of the inner ear. It allows you to orient yourself while in motion. And these canals occur in 3 planes. You have one that occurs like this, in this plane. You have another that occurs in this plane, which is horizontal. So one is vertical going this direction. The other is horizontal going in this direction on this axis. And the third is also vertical going perpendicular to the first, if that makes sense. So we've got another one that's like this. And I don't know if my diagrams are going to be good enough for you to see that. One of them faces this direction, another one faces this direction, and another one faces perpendicular to the first, but also vertical. Which means I can sense motion in 3 directions. Forward, so if I'm doing somersaults like this, cartwheels, if I'm going to the side, or my third one is if I spin in a circle, like making yourself dizzy and going in a circle. What happens when I make myself dizzy? What I'm doing is I'm spinning the perilymph within these canals. I'm causing the perilymph to actually slosh around through these canals, which then tweaks the hair cells at their base and sends a message to my brain that I'm in motion. Now, how do you make yourself dizzy? When you spin, say I spin in a circle, and I'm spinning in circles, making myself dizzy, the perilymph starts to spin. And then if I stop abruptly, the perilymph continues to spin. And my brain is told that I'm in motion in that moment. So there's this message to my brain that goes, you're in motion. And what happens is your eyes try to track. Your brain sends a message to your eyes saying, you're in motion. You need to be moving your eyes with that. And if you've ever looked at somebody, or you can try this with a family member at home, go ahead and spin really a lot, and then stop abruptly and have them look at your eyes. Your eyes will go boom, 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 boom. Your eyes will tweak back and forth because your brain is sending a message that you're in motion, even though you've stopped, and your eyes try to track that motion so that you are staying in balance. So let me give you a personal experience. So I had what's called BPPV. I think that's what it is. Lots of adults get this. It's a temporary thing. It is called benign proximal positioning vertigo. So one day I wake up in the morning, I sit up in bed, and the room spins. It goes woo, woo. It was just like I had, it's just as if I had spun myself in a circle and stopped really abruptly. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on? And for the next 3 days or so, anytime, it got a little better throughout the day, but anytime I would put my head straight back, look at the ceiling, I would get dizzy. It would be, the room would do a couple turns. It was like the room would spin. So I'd hold my head like that and then it'd stop spinning, and then when I put my head back down, boom, boom, it would spin again. This is a common thing that can happen, especially in adults. And what they think has occurred is some of the minerals from the vestibule that were dealing with your static equilibrium get loose. And if they get into the semicircular canals, when you tilt your head, those little minerals bump along within the semicircular canal, and they bump those hair cells, telling your brain that you're in motion when you're not. And that causes really bad vertigo. Some people, it's so bad it'll make them sick to their stomach. I never experienced that, thank goodness, but some people it'll make them sick to their stomach because of the vertigo they get from BPPV. I'm going to go ahead and show you, the only reason I'm going to show this is because it helps with learning how the semicircular canals work and how dynamic equilibrium works. So I'm going to show you a video of an explanation of BPPV, and maybe one of these days, some of you will probably end up with BPPV. It's really common, especially in adults. Maybe your parents or aunts or uncles will have it, and you can say, hey, I know about that. There is something I learned about in my anatomy class. It's called the Epley maneuver. Hope I spelled that right. The Epley maneuver, developed by a doctor with the last name Epley, and he came up with this idea that if these are mineral deposits that are in your semicircular canals that shouldn't be there, hey, if we can get them to get out of the semicircular canal, we're going to cure you. And my experience was, I was able to fix this vertigo within a few minutes. It was really pretty amazing. Like, I'm just so dizzy, and then I did the Epley maneuver, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm back to normal. It was great. So let me put this on here real quick, and hope you like it.
Normally, only with head movement does fluid within the inner ear also move, informing the brain that a head turn occurred. However, should a crystal called an otolith gets displaced into the posterior canal of the inner ear, BPPV dizziness occurs. Fluid movement occurs due to the crystal rather than head turns, causing the brain to think movement has occurred even though none has happened. The Epley maneuver is performed to treat this posterior canal BPPV by trying to get the loose crystal out of the canal. This maneuver is started by turning the head 45 degrees and the body laid back such that the head is extended about 20 to 30 degrees. If BPPV is present, eye twitching called nystagmus will occur. After 30 to 60 seconds, the head is turned 90 degrees to the opposite side and held for another 30 to 60 seconds. The head is then further rotated another 90 degrees, accomplished by having the patient turn onto their side which is then held for another 30 to 60 seconds. At this point, the head should be turned 45 degrees from the horizontal. When performing this maneuver, another individual can help with these position changes. The maneuver is then completed by having the patient sit up. So what's going on with these position changes? Essentially, the head is moved in such a way to manipulate the crystal to fall towards the canal opening. With each position change, it takes about 30 to 60 seconds for the crystal to settle into the most dependent position in the canal. If turns are made before the crystal has a chance to settle, the crystal may fall back the wrong way and the maneuver will fail. It's also important that the head positions are angled correctly, or else the crystal will not settle to the correct position in the canal and the maneuver will fail. Also, if the position changes are done too slowly, the crystal may not settle quickly enough from lack of momentum and the maneuver will also fail. Once the crystal falls out of the canal, the dizziness should resolve if due to posterior canal BPPV.
Pretty cool stuff. I know I've dealt with this. I've had an aunt who had it. I have known numerous people. Another fellow in my ward had this, and we had discussed it and how he got rid of his BPPV. But it's harmless. It just causes a lot of discomfort. You know, you can imagine that whenever you turn your head or look a certain way, you're getting dizzy. Probably not a good idea to be driving while this is going on either. Some people, when they turn their head to the left or right to look for traffic, all of a sudden they get really dizzy. Anyway, but it does show you how your semicircular canals are working. One other thing, when you're in motion, you're out playing basketball or you're doing some activity, you know, your semicircular canals are so important in allowing you to have this balance. The fluid is moving, and as you move, it helps you track your vision. And without it, you know, this is what happens when someone, or one of the things, well, it's really not the same, but it's similar to someone who's intoxicated, right? The messages, they're getting missed messages or slowed down messages from their ear to the brain, and it allows, you know, they stagger and they stumble, they can't walk in a straight line because their communication between the ear and the brain has been disrupted. Okay, the last section, which is really short for this chapter, is over the sense of smell. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and include it into this one over the sense of balance. Okay, because it is really short. Okay, so on the sense of smell, you have a postage stamp size of spot up in your nasal cavity. You have neurons that pass from your brain down through the skull and into your nasal cavity. Does anybody remember, or maybe you remember, what the name of these many small holes that are that pass through the ethmoid bone down into the nasal cavity? Do you remember that? Yes, that's right. It's the cribriform. There you go with that cartoon thing again. So cheesy. Anyway, you have the cribriform, which are all these little holes that your neurons that go to your nasal cavity pass through. Up inside your nose, you have a mucus layer that these neurons are embedded in. So if you look right here, you see that mucus layer? You know, you have a lot of mucus within your nasal cavity, but this mucus layer is really important. When you smell something, the chemicals from whatever the odor is get trapped by that mucus. And then they dissolve into the mucus and they make the neurons fire, and those neurons then send a message to your brain of what smell you are sensing. So these neurons are ciliated, and the cilia within these neurons are covered with these receptors that pick up chemicals, send a message to the brain. Your olfactory sense is tied closely to your limbic. So your limbic system is your system that is involved in emotion. So a lot of times, you know, a smell might trigger an emotion. You know, what does grandma's house smell like? Or, you know, or the smell of fresh cut grass, how that might trigger emotions about summertime, good feelings and dopamine and all that great stuff. If you also remember back from the skeletal system, we learned about the conchae. These are bony projections within the nose and the nasal cavity, and they swirl the air. So if the air went straight in through my nose and down my throat to my lungs, you wouldn't have a very good chance of picking up very many chemicals. But because we have these conchae, which act as basically air spinners or swirlers, the air swirls as it goes through my nasal cavity, and because it goes in a swirl, it stays in the nasal cavity for longer. That's why you sniff. If I sniff, what I'm doing is I'm swirling that air, and the air will spend more time within the nasal cavity, allowing it to interact with this mucus and with the neurons longer, giving me a sense of smell. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stop there. The last section that I'm going to give you for this chapter is going to be the sense of taste, and we will take care of that in the next video.